With Death Battle Season 9 hitting its conclusion, it's time for me to go back to two videos that always get new comments asking about characters that weren't in Death Battle at the time those videos were made. New matchups for every franchise and character in Death Battle. So today we're tackling the latter. In this video we'll be trying to think of new matchups for every character in Season 9 of Death Battle with two rules: no returning characters and no returning characters. Okay, hold on. No characters in Season 9 who are returning from previous seasons, as they are featured in previous videos. And I cannot pair any new character with a character who has already been in Death Battle or already been in this series as someone's opponent. This limitation makes things more fun for me, but if there is an opponent who isn't allowed via the rules, I'll still give them a mention if I know of them. Let's get this season started. Also, if you notice two characters are missing, that's on purpose, and no, I will not talk about it. Harley Quinn versus Tank Girl. To my knowledge, a lot of this just comes from the fact that they're crazy, wacky comic book girls with crazy boyfriends and tons of over-the-top weapons. Frankly, I enjoyed the old Tank Girl movie, even though I haven't seen it in like a decade, and I'm afraid if I rewatch it I'll realize it actually sucks. But this was always the Harley Quinn matchup I was most interested in, and honestly wouldn't even mind it happening. But I also don't give enough of shit about Harley to really want her to come back. Jinx versus Trigger Happy. It's Skylanders Trigger Happy. I mean, how bad can it be? They have oversized guns and they're crazy. Okay, yeah, that's about it. Scarlet Witch versus Raven. I was desperate for Scarlet Witch matchups, okay? Her only goal is Zatanna, and in fact, I'm so starved for both that Zatanna versus Phoenix. Yeah, it's Zatanna versus Phoenix. Look, if I'm to be honest, the only reasonable thing to do here is to say, go support Raven versus Phoenix, I guess. Oh wait, no, Raven was already in Death Battle, so Scarlet Witch versus Hex from Skylanders. Tanjiro versus Hyakimaru. I don't actually know what the theme of this matchup is, but I did hear it a lot during the lead up to Season 9, people saying it's better than Jonathan. I've not personally got any experience with Hyakimaru, but I'd really like another Osamu Tezuka character in Death Battle, and Dororo does seem really cool. The most non-fillery connections I can find is that the two are samurais accompanied by a younger character who go around killing demons responsible for the greatest tragedies of their lives, which is fine, I guess. From my knowledge, Hyakimaru's body is mostly prosthetic with weapons all over, which I think would make for interesting choreography against Tanjiro's katana magic stuff. Also, they didn't really go in depth into Demon Slayer because obviously they wanted to avoid spoilers as the anime was not caught up with the manga. I wouldn't really mind Tanjiro coming back once the anime is done, so they can actually talk about more stuff in it with him, because it feels a bit bare bones in the actual episode he was in, but also I don't care enough. Still, I guess it would bring Hyakimaru in and I would be interested in that. So, Jonathan Joestar, his matchups. I had Kenshiro and Saiga Rikyo, but one of those is already in Death Battle, and the other is the new opponent I gave him in that original video. So obviously, Jonathan versus Boy with Earring, because Persona versus Jojo is just so good. Omni-Man versus Bardock. Look, I won't dwell on this one much because I know there's very strong opinions on all sides of people who like or don't like the match, and people who think Omni-Man or Bardock win. But frankly, Omni-Man's other matchups don't inspire me much, and I like Bardock. Homelander versus Hancock. Again, I won't dwell on this one much, but that's because you can go watch his entry in my non-Marvel DC comic book season list video, which I'll link in the description. Magneto. He has one matchup in particular I know a lot of people wanted. A big matchup that's really a really obscure character to fight Magneto, but he is from a series that everyone wants to see get on Death Battle. That's right, it's Magneto versus Dr. Polaris. It's great, let's go. Unfortunately, Tetsuo was a really difficult character to think of anything for, because Tetsuo's matchups other than the one he had on Death Battle are Mewtwo and Luxidoclonius, both of which have already been on Death Battle too. So I just said fuck it, he's fighting the leader because he's got a big head and he is psychic. This one is specifically a matchup for John Yauta the character. Who else can it be but Cuddles the Gene Stealer? You don't know who Cuddles the Gene Stealer is? Go watch my Space Hulk videos for fuck's sake. Excalibur is another one I couldn't really find anything for. It seems like his matchups are just Raiden, and the other one is Genji, who I think I used in one of the last videos. I don't remember though. But just to be safe, here's Zero from Borderlands. I don't even know if that's how you say the guy's name. I don't know anything about Borderlands, but Zero looks cool and has a cool sword, so I don't know. James Bond versus Jason Bourne. Frankly, this matchup is really just a rivalry between the unstoppable secret agents who were compared a lot during their time. In fact, sometimes it almost feels to me like Jason Bourne took a step away from secret agent stuff to avoid the comparison with Bond. Of course, really, when you think about it, I don't think there's much purpose to this matchup anymore. For all intents and purposes, Jason Bourne basically just offers all the exact same things John Wick did with nothing new to bring him in. And Bond is still just Bond. So this matchup would just end up being Bond versus Wick 2 as opposed to anything unique. The only way to make it stand out probably would be to do it in live action, but that sounds like a pain in the ass. John Wick versus John Rambo. I quite like both of these Johns, and despite what it might seem, they do actually have their similarities. They're retired men who just tried to live a normal life after they endured endless bloodshed in their past, but they were forced back into their former lives as killers renowned for being unstoppable. To my knowledge, it's apparently a decently debatable matchup, and honestly, I think it just sounds kinda cool. I'm a big fan of Rambo, even the bad movies to an extent, so there's a bias there. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see if Wick even has enough to warrant coming back, and if not, then Rambo vs. McClane also works, even if not as well. Black Adam was another really difficult one, because his matchups are Apocalypse and Dr. Doom. One who he already fought, and one who has already been on Death Battle twice. So I had to just go with Nicol Bolas from Magic the Gathering. Two Egyptian god kings who derived their power from divine sources. That's the theme, and obviously it's not really a one-to-one comparison, and both have better, but I really didn't have anything else to go with for Adam. I do really like Nicol Bolas though, and Magic the Gathering would be an awesome franchise to bring the Death Battle. Apocalypse vs. Despero. Look, I also didn't have much for Apocalypse, and between Mongol and Despero, I just like Despero more. He and Apocalypse are telepathic tyrant rulers with incredible control over their molecular structure, and you can probably compare the Flame of Pytar to the Death Seed too. They're also just built like brick shithouses, and frankly, I think the fight will go pretty damn hard. Of course, it is just kind of an uninteresting Marvel vs. DC matchup, but screw it. Xeno Trunks vs. Vector Prime. These two are multiversal time cops who serve under a supreme god ordered to look after time and fix disturbances. They also have really cool fuck-off swords, and most importantly, Vector Prime originates in Transformers Cybertron, which honestly is just Dragon Ball, but with giant robots instead of Saiyans. So, this is always my preferred for Xeno Trunks, and I still really like it. Of the 13 primes, Vector Prime is most likely my favorite. I love him in Transformers Cybertron, I love Transformers Cybertron in spite of its flaws, I love Dragon Ball, and I love Dragon Ball Xenoverse, so yeah. RG Silver vs. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Celebi. Frankly, I don't even know for certain what this is beyond alternate versions of a time-traveling animal thing, but it is just the inferior Celebi vs. Cell. SpongeBob vs. Gumball. Hey look, this is a matchup that let's avoid talking about because people like to not be civil about this one. Super Friends Aquaman vs. Superhero Squad Show Hawkeye. I mean, what the hell was I supposed to do? These are the dumb cartoon versions of the biggest jokes of Marvel and DC's respective flagship hero teams, despite the fact that in the comics they're actually genuinely pretty cool characters. Superhero Squad Show is also fucking based. Jason Voorhees vs. Killer Croc. This is Galaxy Video Max's favourite matchup, so I had to support it. Jason Voorhees and Killer Croc are both regular humans who are very deformed and unusual, and have a penchant for water and being in lakes. They also kill a lot of people. It's a goated matchup, definitely supported to put a smile on the face of a man who loves it. Even if it's not as good as Killer Croc vs. Stuart Little. Michael Myers vs. Leatherface. I actually don't know if there's much of a strong theme for this one, beyond them being, like, some of the original classic slasher film villains. But I guess the rather interesting dynamic that one is always on the hunt to kill members of his family while the other one really loves his family and will protect them is kind of there. I find the matchup neat. They've been reimagined a ton of times with many different continuities, so in a way you're not just putting the original slasher villains together, but their entire legacies and their whole history against each other. I know Leatherface has other opponents, but they're all kind of nobodies that just feel weird against a figure of such iconicity as Leatherface. While Michael did get an episode this season, and isn't likely to have much new in the future, he was very barely analysed in terms of stats and feats and methods of killing, that I think he could easily be looked at again sometime in a later season. And if he was, I really do like this match. Sauron was a difficult character to think for because his matchups really just amount to characters you've already gotten in Death Battle, so here's just Sauron vs. Asdrubal Vect from Warhammer 40k. They're both evil incarnate, please ignore Melkor and Abaddon the lame ass, and they're known above all things as schemers, plotters, and manipulators who sit on their thrones altering the way of the world for their own gain. They carved kingdoms to rule from and wage war for countless years. It's not really super thematic, but I do really like Asdrubal Vect. I find him to be a very effective and intimidating villain, outside of Dawn of War Soulstorm, but we don't talk about that. Lich King. Again, his matchups are all characters already in Death Battle, like Nightmare and Darth Vader, so here's First Hassan. Oh, is that a fake character? Well, I'm not talking about it then. Okay, so Deku vs. Gon. The theme is indeed that they do wear green, and they do want to punch the best. I'm aware it's not the most thematic matchup, or even the best, but in many ways, it's not even that good. But there are a lot of fans of it, and I'm just here to avoid throwing out a Deku match that has even more negative reputation than Gon. Deku's got a lot of matchups, and if we're being honest, Deku will eventually fight out more quirks and get new feats that'll make him acknowledgeable as someone who can return even if I don't care for him. So this episode could very well still happen someday, but I wouldn't really care one way or the other. Asta vs Meliodas. Again, this was the popular matchup for Asta before and even after, I imagine, his actual death battle. Like Deku, I believe Asta's series is still ongoing, so there's likely to be plenty of opportunity for this to happen in the future with new material for Asta. I don't really know what the theme is with this, but frankly I don't have any interest in 7 Deadly Sins, so I don't really care. But it is the Asta matchup that is probably the most popular right now, and probably ever was. So, you know. Gogeta vs Omnimon. I've talked about this one before, but it is one of my favorite Dragon Ball matchups. For as simple a theme as two fusions who exist solely for the purposes of the most hype and adrenaline-inducing fight sequences possible, I think this matchup does go as hard as possible. The animation potential is something else, with these two cosmic scale characters having some of the most breathtaking animation sequences in their franchises. The fight will be one that without a doubt focuses on being as intense and fast-paced as it can be, using their techniques and abilities to rapid-fire pelt each other. I'm aware that some might not like the size gap, but not only does Omnimon seem to fluctuate in size from what I've seen, but Gogeta's two biggest fights are Omega Shenron in GT and Broly in Super, both of which tower over him in terms of their size, so it is pretty standard for Gogeta to fight someone that eclipses him in sheer mass. Frankly, my only problem with the matchup is that we already got Gogeta vs Vegito, and Gogeta is just not a character interesting enough to warrant more than one episode, especially given the character he fought was just himself again. Vegito was basically impossible to think of anything for, because he's barely a character, and anything he brings to the table is just lesser to what Gogeta brings. His matchups are Gogeta and Dr. Fate, both of which are on Death Battle. So the only character I could actually think of feeding him to was Dr. Strange Fate from Amalgam Comics. Then I asked a friend of mine and he gave me Susanumon from Digimon, a fusion of two humans through sacred objects that makes a deific entity sorta like Vegito. Also, apparently they both show up in the worst parts of their shows, which is great, with Vegito showing up in the Future Trunks arc and Susanumon in Frontier. Also, apparently Susanumon is a lamer Omnimon, so you can infer whether that's a similarity or contrast to Vegito, but that's up to you. Everyone's allowed to be wrong if they want. And that'll do it for that video, I guess. I hope you guys enjoyed it. You might be able to tell I've not got a lot of energy right now. I'd rather not talk about it, but I have no idea what else to say. We'll see what happens next year and whether I might have more exciting matchups to talk about or not. Only a few of these really ended up being anything I care for, but there's not many I would consider outright bad. Next time we'll come back to the other side of this series and talk about new matchups for every new franchise we've gotten on Death Battle in Season 9, and I can't wait for that.